Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have you back here at the Rambon Hotel in the Royal Borough, just across from the Kensington Gardens. So thank you all very much for joining us. I'm Christina Blage. I'm the CEO and founder of Open Revenue Consulting. We're a strategic tech consulting focused on growing asset value through hotels. We've got specialized technology, and we have specialized consulting program. We'll see more later in the day. Why we're here, really, we're here to celebrate our Asset Growth Summit, which is a real opportunity to celebrate also opportunities that are available to hotels and restaurants to drive margin, and adopting really best practices from experts that we have gathered here in the room with us, and quite a few more online watching us live. So thank you, everyone. Welcome everyone that's connecting through live streaming with us via LinkedIn and YouTube today. We're really, really excited. We wanted to create this channel so everybody that wasn't able to be with us in the room today can watch us and can take it all in. Why are we really here today? We've enjoyed incredible growth when we talk about ADR, when we talk about occupancies, and we've seen some really good performances on the ancillary stream side of things. But if we're not able to really understand our costs in every single profit center and contain those and manage our resources effectively, we are flowing a lot less margin, and we're converting a lot less of our revenue to the bottom line. So that's why we're here today. We're here to get a lot more visibility and opportunities that we have to really grow margin. So we're going to have a laser focus on that today. We'll see the state of play. When we talk about GOP, a pretty clear picture of what's going on in the UK and what's going on in EMEA. And for that, I am delighted to welcome to the stage Catherine Cockhill, who's here with us, a commercial director of Hostats, and she will tell us all about it. Welcome, Catherine.
Remember have I turned it on? Yes, you can hear me, can you?
All right, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. If you'd like to move on to the next slide, my able assistant will press the button, and the next one as well, please, to keep an eye on what you're doing then. Okay, so joining Hostats really made me realise and understand even more than I did when I was working in hotels with Hilton and with Radisson Blu and with various independent organisations, how important data is. And not just any data, because there is loads of it, as we know, and it all can become very overwhelming. And sometimes it's hard to really understand what's important and get past the noise, because all that noise can be very distracting. Just a little bit about to remember to say that. A little bit about Hostats. So we have 3 global locations. We actually have about 54 team members. Head office is in Worcester in the UK, still privately owned organisation. And then we have offices in Houston, and I have a team in Bangkok, and we also have team members in Europe as well. And where Hostats is now, we are at actually 11,500 hotels worldwide, which has been a really quite fast growth from 2018-19, where we were sitting at a 3,500. So that pandemic period has really underlined how important data is, and we've had more and more hotels who are contributing their monthly P&L data in order for us to offer out the insight that gives to people like yourselves, to hoteliers, and of course also to the asset and investment world. So historically, our industry has been very good at focusing on rooms revenue, as Olga and I were just discussing. It's where the whole revenue management strategies came from. But we're less good at looking at what makes us profitable. And understanding and controlling those cost structures in conjunction with the revenue drivers is what's really very important. And in fact, we are starting to win that battle. IHG this year, for the first time in the Middle East, have taken on a PGI, profit generated index, rather than RGI. Hilton have now given all of their revenue management team at RMCC access to Hostats data. So where the big boys go, or the big girls, hopefully the rest will follow. So they're really focused on full profitability and giving as many people as possible access to the data and to the segments. And my aim today is to give a bit of an insight into what's happened for hotels year to date versus 2022, and also in some cases versus 2019, because we're still looking back at that kind of nirvana year in some cases, and trying to understand the headwinds that hotels are facing in the industry as a whole. Click. So that's the background. Let's have a look at what we know for 2022, 2023. Click, and let's get into the data. So looking at data as a matrix and displaying a total revenue per available room percentage change. Can you see past the thing? Percentage change versus that GOP percentage change. So the horizontal is the TRevPAR and the vertical obviously is the GOP. And in those four quadrants at the top, to the right of the zero, those are achieving obviously a higher total revenue, and those to the left, the lower revenue. So top left, we actually have no one here in this segment, which would be a lower total revenue, but perhaps a higher GOP. So that would be a good flex story. They may not have achieved the revenue they wanted, but they were able to improve on some of the cost spendings in order to hold on to as much of that revenue as possible. The lower top line revenue, it's moved by itself there. Has that happened? That's right. The bottom left, we have Amsterdam, Madrid, and the rest really struggling versus 2019 with both revenue and conversion. Cost management and budgeting going to be very important for 2024. And in the bottom right quadrant, a total revenue per available room increase, but a lower GOP conversion. Some struggle again to control those costs coming back into that business when we look at Vienna and Manchester and Brussels and the like. Next slide, please. Much better picture now versus 2022 for all, perhaps except Barcelona and Budapest in particular, and actually Dublin as well. The rest in a very strong position overall and really showing that recovery very clearly. Next slide, please. So looking at the data overall on a month-by-month basis now to see revenue per available room flow. Rooms leading the way, as we've heard, with ADR, alongside other revenue, and that other revenue includes golf and spa and all the other ancillary revenues. And although demand for C&B is improving in some regions, certainly in the provinces, and the Bob is looking positive for many, overall C&B still back versus same time in 2019. When we look at, when we look at the actual occupancy by asset class now, rather than the index, you can see that the trend over the last 2 years has exceeded August 2022 in all classes. Extended stay has done really well. People during the pandemic, when they couldn't stay in hotel in smaller spaces and they wanted as much room as possible while they were away, and really tried and tested that apartment space, really fell in love with it, and that has continued to show a positive picture. Although there is some evidence that in some areas this might be tailing off slightly, and that's something that we are seeing in some of the European regions. When we look at the rate impact, we can see that all of the kind of mix of that, we can see that all the ADRs are growing except for government. So SMERF, I'm sure everybody knows, but I was asked this question a couple of times last week, is your social, military and education religious groups. Tours, we know, government, it's obviously corporate is the groups segment, so anything over 10 rooms that forms that forms your meeting and events areas. Qualified is business that you have to demonstrate that you have access to that particular rate when you reach the front desk, and I think the rest are clear. And discount is largely the OTA segment. Okay, retail is obviously website and brand.com. And we do see negative negotiated rates, and tours have had big hikes in rates since 2019 and even since last year. And really, that's probably all part of a commercial plan. Hoteliers deciding they don't really need those traditionally cheaper rates. We're getting it from the top line. We're getting it from brand.com and the leisure business that's coming through. Some of that's probably also a little bit to do with perhaps corporates not being able to get the rates that they want through the negotiated channel, and perhaps booking through the OTA segment as well. I was at an travel agent conference last week, showing them some of this data to help them understand why it's so expensive to book a conference or to negotiate those. We're all in the RFP season now, and I'm trying to get them to understand why the ADRs are so high and what it is that hotels are struggling with. And some of the cost data that I'm going to show you really help to explain why that is and why there's probably a reset now. If we take a look at the segmentation mix, thank you, for London, here you can see very clearly what is driving that rate. Retail seeing a little growth versus last year, which is encouraging. So that's the hotel's website or brand.com, as I said. The OTAs, which sit in the discount segment and therefore carry that highest cost of acquisition, that does need some consideration when we think about how best to target our business and the costs that are associated with that. And I've said there could be some pressure in this segment as well from the corporate demand with less access to those negotiated rates. We do also see growth in the corporate rooms ADR, so that's the meetings and events element, anything over 10 rooms. that could hint as being some more demand for those events and group bookings, but we'll see as we move forward. Looking at it for the provinces now, and here again, following that same pattern, albeit with lower rates, of course. And even here, retail seeing a little growth, which is encouraging. That is your own website, and that was a great opportunity during the pandemic to really talk to your customers and get them to be booking directly with you, because obviously that costs you less money. It is starting to fall away, unfortunately. The potentially a little bit of laziness there around, I don't really mind how it comes. The rate's great, so we know we're not really too worried about it. But of course, you don't get all that good guest data for your CRM if you're not talking to the guest direct and you don't have their contact details, which of course makes it more difficult when you are planning your strategy for following year, because you can't talk to those people directly. And the growth of the corporate ADRs, with 15% growth since 2019, it does seem to be a concerted push out of London here, with some more accessible rates, easier travel potentially, some better parking, and maybe even more staff to run events, because staffing obviously is a big issue. Thank you. Looking at the actual revenue mix for London by segment for London first, you can see here clearly that the negotiated element has reduced significantly, with a decline of versus 2019 of 36%, which is a big drop. And as I said, there is obviously some real concerted thought process behind that as a strategy. Corporate has stayed almost entirely flat, with just a bit of a dip in 2022, and that does kind of put to bed the increased demand question, at least for London. If we look at that for the provinces, and we see a similar picture as far as negotiated is concerned, but quite a different one for corporate, where we see a 47% growth in the mix, which doesn't appear to be impacted by that 15% growth in ADR that we saw in the last two slides. Occupancy and revenue. So this kind of up and down, and how one is impacted by the other. It's one of my favourite views of what's been happening and where we might strike a note of caution in the trend for 2024. Hotels have been doing a lot more with less, and the ADR has been there to carry that and to head off some of those cold winds that we have experienced, particularly in the UK. However, it is something we're keeping a steady eye on, because the potential of that slackening demand, driven by those headwinds of possible fall off in the leisure elements, which was so strong in 2022, is a very important area to focus on to maintain that total revenue piece. And it's the costs that are creeping in, putting that considerable pressure on profitability, as well as the occupancy number reduction. And the ADR is a crucial element in holding the profitability puzzle together, as we will see. So let's have a look at some of the actual costs involved by city. And we're looking at total booking costs as a percentage of total revenue year to date and versus 2019. So in all cities except Bristol and London, which is pretty much on par, the costs have been driven up quite significantly, particularly in Birmingham and Edinburgh. And in the next slide, we can see how this is broken down. So you have real clear visibility of costs on all of the relevant segments. So working out the actual impact of a value of a booking is obviously a key part of what all of the commercial teams in hotels are doing. What business is the right business to take? Orange is the rooms cost. The bluey colour is the OTA commission, and then the grey is the travel agent commission element. And in the red circle at the bottom is the cost change versus 2019 over that same period. So the growth in OTA business obviously is impacting how much it's costing us. We need to consider that when we're really thinking about what we're targeting for 2024. I didn't get a chance to. I could have added in loyalty here, because I know that is a significant area. I'm looking at a certain person in the room who has a very good insight into what the loyalty picture is, and this is often something that comes up with owners and sets out the costs and their relative values per occupied room. They all need to be taken into consideration when you're looking at overall profitability for any piece of business that you might take. Looking at the C&B labour question, and the UK versus Europe per square metre now. Regions are still doing more with less people. When we look at this, it's especially interesting for the UK when we consider the wage inflation and what hoteliers have been having to pay in order to entice staff back. We all know about the Great Resign. We all know about the fact that coming in back back into the industry, having had a long time away, or even enticing a whole new generation of young people into the industry is pretty tough. And we're seeing a significant change in potentially in how we're staffing events and what sort of service that is being offered, because we just don't have the people. And if you're talking to the agents last week, if the feedback for them from hotels is that if you want something next week and you want to sit down and you want full service, we just can't deliver it to you. So, there is a definite shift there. We have heard that hotels are making changes to the types of packages that they're offering to conference organisers. Meetings are perhaps a lot smaller or a lot bigger. The ones in the middle, the sort of 100 to 150s, are the ones that are perhaps struggling with getting the delegates that they need, where people start to think about sustainability, about their carbon footprint, about how much they're travelling, and which events they really have to be at, and such as this one, where there is an opportunity to go online, which is, of course, a really good mixture and can help build the numbers. So let's have a look at what's going on in the room in terms of cost, because it's not just about the people. Cost of linen, purchase and rentals increased by 30%, credit card commissions, housekeeping labour plus 65%. Absolutely enormous increase in cost. It's where we've gone beyond, if you don't hang your towel up, we won't change it. If you hang your towel up, we won't change it. It's way beyond that now. It's actually, if you don't have your room clean, we'll give you a £10 F&B voucher, whatever people can do in order to have less housekeeping staff on offer, because they just can't find those people is clearly what we're seeing. And of course that all adds on to the cost of an event that anybody's trying to organise. What a guest expects in the room remains an interesting topic. Much had obviously been stripped out during the pandemic, when we went down to the zero budgeting lines. And of course, water, Nespresso, paper, all the bathroom amenities, all of these things have had to come back, and they're all costing more. And what the brands expect and require as part of their differentiation elements, when we think of Hilton Honors, what are they called? Rooms at the top, the executive experience, and Marriott have the same. It's an important part of the picture, and the overall pressure to stick to those brand promises is heavy, and all of those things cost more. The other rooms expenses I just mentioned comprises the rooms department's share of training expenses, decoration costs, and equipment rental, things like ice machines, which you never normally think about when you're thinking about a hotel, or certainly I don't. But all these, again, were obvious areas for reduction in the pandemic, and they have dropped significantly in 2020 versus 2019, but they have absolutely come back with a vengeance. There is only a certain amount of time that you don't refurbish rooms, that you don't replace the elements of the guest experience, and hoteliers can no longer put these things off. Looking at ancillary revenues and moving on to where the money is, and how that relates directly to simple room sales. And this is the percentage change for the UK per available room. I mentioned the joy of golf in the past. We talked about it a lot, and we really see its impact. During the pandemic, people went out, bought golf clubs, took golf lessons, and fell in love. And that absolutely is still a hugely important part of what people want to do when they're going away for a weekend, or they're going away for an event and they want to have that experience. So when I was at R&R 2 weeks ago in Lisbon, that whole discussion around what is still important to guests and what we need to plan for the future, and what's going to differentiate one property from another in a guest's mind, that is still a very important area. Outlet revenue is an interesting one, back 10.7%, and that's something we're seeing actually globally. The only place in the world where I've seen the data where F&B is not back is Italy. Which is interesting, but perhaps not that unexpected. Italian food is a huge one. But the experience of a guest arriving, and I've had this twice myself, arriving in a hotel, being explained what's on offer, and then saying, concierge telling me if I don't like it, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, they'll bring it in, it's fine. Something I would never have considered before the pandemic. I would have been at first I wouldn't have thought of it, but equally I would have been much embarrassed if I had thought of it, that, I would be bringing in pizza delivery into my room. That is completely normal now. And if concierge are suggesting that as an offer, guests are still eating, they're still spending money, but we really need to think about whether what we're offering is what guests are wanting to pay for, and perhaps not suggesting Uber and Deliveroo as an option. Could be something to be aware. Hoteliers, of course, are also saying that the cost of delivering room service, the cost of delivering F&B, they haven't got the staff to open all their restaurants. They're not opening at lunchtime. All of that plays into that conversation. I will just mention cancellation and attrition, because this is a cancellation is obvious, charging for cancellation. Attrition is the element of rooms and food and beverage part of a contract that that's then not delivered because the guests don't arrive. And in the past, we have definitely seen hoteliers not charging for that and just saying, "Don't worry. You bring me business every year. You're going to come back next year. I'll let you off, or we'll split it." That is absolutely not happening anymore. Contracts are signed, sealed, and the money's coming whether your guests are arriving or not. So this is quite a big change, and again, it's something that we're seeing everywhere, not just in the UK. Spa and leisure is obvious, 11.1%. It's a big reason for people to go and stay in a particular property. People are still prepared to pay and pay handsomely in some cases for those treatments. When we look at utilities here, this time last year, it was definitely the elephant front and centre in the room. For the UK, at least, things have settled down. And although we may never reach those normal lows of August 2019, where we were around €5.76, at least up until last week, the crisis point seems to have passed. What's going on in the Middle East, apart from the hideous humanitarian picture that we're all seeing, and I'm sure all our hearts go out to what's going on there. But from a utilities point of view for the Middle East, obviously that now makes things very volatile from a cost perspective. And so, when you're thinking about renegotiating your utilities costs, your utilities contracts, having someone who really knows how to hedge that for you is very, very important, never more so than now where things are so volatile. Just having a little bit of a look at what all of that cost structure has done to rooms revenue. This is quite hard to see, but you can see so this is United Kingdom versus Northern Europe. You have your average daily rate at 143 versus 133 the year before. And when we look at the financial ratios at the bottom, all of that impact, even with the growth, so total hotel revenue, 148.90 versus 125 last year. The GOP as a percentage of total revenue is still only sitting at 34.2 versus 34.1 last year. So that is where we are. Things are very tight. We are not making hay while the sun shines. That ADR is carrying the rest of the business, and it's a very understanding all of those cost lines and the ability to flex them if you need to is hugely important. Looking at the margins, the GOP margin by asset type for the UK, despite those ADRs and the revenue increases, as I've just shown, the overall profitability picture clearly shows the struggle and across all asset classes and leaves us with a clear picture of the current situation. I just wanted to show you, if you can click through the next bit, what it is that hotels actually have access to. So in terms of hotel data on the website, you see the full spread of the departmental data down the left-hand side. If you can just click through them. You have a dashboard which gives you your overall data versus your comp set across some key KPIs. And then you have That's fine. And then again, it's difficult to see because it's not very dark. But you have all of your revenue data, all of your cost lines, and all of your expenses. So full labour is 6 to 8 lines of labour data there. Really gives you the ability to understand exactly where you have the opportunity to make some changes if you need to, or to understand what's going on versus your competitive set. We talked a bit about moving away from RevPAR, which was that traditional revenue management, which was all about where your hotel was, your very locally based comp set in your street, and the purpose obviously is to maximise room revenue. And operational benchmarking, which what this is about, is that full P&L analysis. It's really understanding not just where which hotels you're competing with, but what kind of guest you're looking for, because there's full segmentation data that shows you where the opportunities might be, things that you're not accessing, excuse me, and an ADR that you maybe would be really keen to have on a Thursday or a Friday night, for example. Comp set mix is very important. The type of facilities, the business aspiration of the property, the segment you're trying to attract, and that success and profitability, which are measured by flow and flex, and ultimately the owner's return is what it's all about. There are lots of metrics. I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to just scoot through those. I think we're nearly at the end now. Lots of different metrics apart from rooms revenue. Conference banqueting by square metre is a really useful one. Anything by square metre really gives you a feeling for what's available versus the comp set that you've got. Next slide, please. And then there are the opportunity to benchmark internally, so just your own hotels versus each other. External benchmarking with either a free regional set or the opportunity to purchase a specific comp set for your property. And of course, for hoteliers who are contributing their data, there is also the opportunity to access market reports for feasibility studies, etc., which can be really useful if you're looking at different areas where you don't currently have hotels. And I hope that is my time up. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Catherine. That was very, very insightful data, as we all have seen.